Is this election being fought on the issues that Canadians really care about? I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show. Former Prime Minister Kim Campbell never won an election. In the one campaign she ran in, she made misstep after misstep and ended up losing in one of the biggest landslides in Canadian history. One of her worst gaffes and most memorable moments on that campaign trail was when she said this: "An election is no time to discuss serious issues." Well, Kim Campbell lost, and I think for good reason. Elections are a perfect time to talk about the serious issues that matter to Canadians. And so in that spirit, we surveyed our True North audience to find out what issues they care about and what issues they'd like to see focused on in the election. There were 4 major issues that came out in this survey. The first one is personal freedom, including freedom of speech, internet censorship, government funding of the media, and the collusion between big tech and big government. The second issue that True North Nation wants us to cover is the health of the economy, including creating jobs, growing the economy, balancing the budget, and attracting investment. The third is the tax burden on families. And number 4 is bringing more jobs to Canada, specifically bringing manufacturing jobs back to Canada. So are the leaders discussing these issues? Are the leaders addressing the issues that actually matter to Canadians? And to help us make sense of some of these issues, we have our True North in-house pollster, Hamish Marshall, joining us on the line. Hi, Hamish. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Candice. Great to be here.
So I want to focus in on the campaign so far and what each of the leaders have been talking about and their messaging, so we can sort of understand how they're doing in connecting with Canadians. So first, let's start with Justin Trudeau. I think he started off. It looks like a pretty rocky start, to be fair. I think that he's flip-flopped on vaccine mandates. We've seen the bungling of the Afghanistan file. And then he came up with this weird she session thing yesterday, and he didn't even deliver the lines properly. But I think he's trying to criticize the Conservatives for not being feminist enough. So can you help us understand what it is that Justin Trudeau is going for in this campaign?
Well, I think his core message is that things are going pretty well. If we've done a good job fighting the vaccine, and we'll keep going, and we can do great things together. Obviously, the last few days, I think there's been as you say, a few bumps along the road. Although the one thing I will say about Trudeau and the Liberals is that when they often get the initial reaction to something wrong, Afghanistan, fudging on recognizing the Taliban, even on the vaccine mandates situation, they often get their first initial gut reaction. They screw something up and it doesn't really click. They fix it fast. And, what happened is, Trudeau on, I guess it was Monday, said, we'll wait and see about recognizing the Taliban. But by then, the next day, he was saying we have no plans to do it and they're terrorists. They fix it fast. And for those of us who obsess about elections, we can say, well, he said one thing, and he changed his mind, he flip-flopped. The vast majority of people aren't paying that close attention. It's the middle of August, and he gets to the right point quickly. He doesn't take a week to fix something. So we might have noticed that he flip-flopped, but the vast majority of Canadians are just going to say, well, he doesn't think we're going to recognize the Taliban. So he has a problem, but he can fix it quickly, and that's one of the reasons why he wins elections.
That's a really good point. What do you think, just to focus in a little bit more on Afghanistan? I mean, this was probably totally unforeseen by the Liberals when they decided to prompt this election. And, there is a lot of punditry out there saying, that this is a disaster for Trudeau, the fact that he's hosting this election and forcing us into it while this country that Canada has had a stake in working on and rebuilding over the last 2 decades has been taken over by the terrorist group that we helped remove. Do you think that will have an impact on Trudeau? Do you think that will, create a negativity around him hosting this election in the first place?
Oh, look, I would love to say yes, but I think that so I don't know if the Liberals would have called the election the same day that Kabul fell if they'd known it was going to happen. The problem he's got is this promise to refugees, right? He promised that we're going to bring 20,000 refugees over from Afghanistan. Obviously, in some cases, people connected to people who help the Canadian forces, which sounds good. How that's implemented is where the danger is for him. If stories come out that people waiting for Canadian protection are ended up getting, taken away by the Taliban or getting hurt or killed, that's where it can become very, very, very dangerous for people that Canada may have promised to, and while waiting for us to deliver end up in a very bad situation. That's where it can be very dangerous to him. I don't think anyone's going to blame him for the fall of Kabul. I don't think Canada pulled its forces out of Afghanistan years ago. It's not the same situation that's going on in the States.
Okay, let's move on and talk about Aaron O'Toole, a Conservative leader, because he has been focusing on the issues that True North survey found that our supporters and our readers and our viewers really do care about. I'm talking about consumer issues. He had a really interesting idea to get rid of the GST for the month of December to try to spur retail shopping. He's focused on innovation and attracting jobs to Canada. So I want your analysis. How has his message been breaking through, and do these sort of economic issues really move voters?
Well, I think they move the voters who care about them, and as your True North survey identified, there's lots of people who do. The people who are moved by those issues are more on the Conservative side of the spectrum. So he's talking about issues that work with his Conservative base, but they also work with voters who are open to voting Conservative, who might just be kicking the tires right now. So it's certainly the right message for the sort of people that he needs in order to get more votes and more seats in Trudeau. The GST vacation, certainly interesting and eye-catching. But we saw it tried in BC last year, where they talked about doing it for a full year. We'll see how it plays out in this election.
And I want to pick up on his housing policy as well, because I was a little surprised. I was reading an analysis in Maclean's, which doesn't really seem to usually be a place where you would find, complimentary material about the Conservatives. But they said that Aaron O'Toole's housing policy and his ideas to enable more houses to be built across Canada. I think he said that he wants 1 million new houses to be built. Do you think that's a strong issue for O'Toole, and is that something that Canadians will vote over?
Well, Canadians are deeply concerned about the price of housing, especially in Toronto and Vancouver, but frankly, it's in most major centers now. It's becoming unaffordable to buy a family house, inside of a couple-hour commute. And that's a really big problem for a lot of Canadians, and any polling will show that. The trick is what to do about it. Research that I've done in the past shows that people see it primarily as a demand issue, not a supply issue. It might very well be a supply issue that we can do things to create 1 million new houses, to reduce red tape at city halls and everything else in order to get more houses built quickly. Canadians see it as a function of, a good chunk of Canadians blame this on foreign buyers, foreign investors coming in and buying up houses. Another group simply feel that non-market housing should really just be constructed by a provincial or federal government or some municipal government for someone. The number of people who think that we can open up huge amounts more housing construction based on regulatory changes in order to make it easier to build houses is, I think it's quite small. I think it's a good idea, but it's not something that it's a policy that needs to be explained. And when Canadians have it explained to them, they get it, but it's not their first gut instinct of what the answer is.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, let's move on to Jagmeet Singh. So the NDP is really focused, it seems, their entire platform was focused on ways to tax the ultra-rich. And, this seems to be going back to the sort of bread and butter for the NDP. Do you think this is a good way for the NDP to sort of threaten Trudeau and his base by talking about these new tax regime for ultra-rich Canadians?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the NDP have one very, very important job, which is make sure that Trudeau can't scare progressives into voting for him and see the NDP bleed 3, 4, 5 points in the last 10 days of the campaign. That for them is the difference between keeping around the same number of seats, maybe picking up a few, and picking up a bunch of seats. So they need to do that. In order to do that, they need to keep burnishing their true progressive cred and put a wedge on Trudeau around these issues, so they can say, well, Trudeau doesn't care about this, or Trudeau doesn't care about that. He's not in favor of a wealth tax. So he's not really truly progressive. So I think we're going to see a lot more from them in that vein between now and Election Day.
Interesting. Well, Hamish, thank you so much for helping us break this down. We look forward to your continued analysis throughout the campaign. Hamish Marshall, True North's in-house pollster.
My pleasure.
Contrary to what former Prime Minister Kim Campbell once said, elections are the time to talk about serious issues, and True North will continue to be here to push these issues. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show.